Well, let's talk policy now. Superannuation, we've seen drastic changes this week. I want to talk about that with the independent MP Allegra Spender. Allegra, thanks so much for your time. This is something that concerned you at the time, the previous package, I would say, and much of your electorate as well. Are you satisfied with the changes the Treasurer has come up with?
Look, I am satisfied with the changes that the Treasurer's come up with. I had real problems, and so did my community, with the original policy that the government put forward. And, we surveyed the community. We had about 1,300 people reply. And most people said, we agree that we should reduce concessions on super high, for particularly high balances, because superannuation and the tax concessions are really about helping people save for retirement. They're not about accumulation of wealth. So, we accept that those concessions need to be rolled back. But I had loud and clear that taxation of unrealised gains, in particular, was not accepted by the community, and certainly not by the economists and experts I spoke to. And I think this is both on principle, but also because of the impact it would have, the unintended consequences it would have in terms of making things like investments in startup and venture capital and innovation less attractive in self-managed super, where some of those venture funds, almost like half of their funding is coming from those self-managed super funds. So that was my position in the last Parliament. I had that position very strongly. I, took that position and worked actually with the Senate to try and prevent that legislation going through last Parliament, and successfully prevent it going through last Parliament. And this Parliament, I've just kept the same position. And so I'm really pleased to see that the government has moved, and I think has come up with a very sensible compromise on the policy overall. And also, I think really importantly, added in the tax benefit for people on lower incomes, so that they can put more money into super and aren't disadvantaged when they do so.
Yeah, that absolutely made sense. You shouldn't be taxed more in super than you were on income. That was certainly an anomaly that needed to be fixed. But was still the central violation of the principle taxing unrealised gains, essentially taxing people before they've even earned money?
Yeah, that was for me the biggest issue with the last the legislation that was originally crafted. I just don't think you should tax profits before they are made, and in particular, you don't tax profits which you might never see, but you still have to pay the tax on it. So I think the government has listened to experts, listened to voices around on this, and made, I think, an appropriate compromise.
Okay. Do you think the Greens are going to pass it?
Look, I think we will see. They've made all sorts of noises about this, but I think I think there's a lot of a reason why this should go through, and so I think I hope that they do.
Yeah, well, we will see. Sometimes the Greens let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but hey, we will see where they land on that. Doesn't look like the coalition will, because they don't want to give. I mean, they want to be the party of lower taxes. They couldn't be seen to be helping the government raise them. Do you accept that?
I guess so. For me, this has always been about shifting the balance. My approach on tax has always been, I don't want to see higher taxes. I actually want to see ideally lower taxes over time, but I want to make sure that the taxes are in the places that are best for wealth creation, for people to create their lives and prosperity that they want to, for business innovation. And I think, for me, this is about saying, if we have lots of tax concessions on high value super funds, it means it restricts our ability to lower taxes on other parts of the economy, particularly on younger people's wages. Those young people who are struggling to get into homes, who have big HECS debts and have big childcare costs, those are the people that I want to see paying less tax. And so you've got to try and find it from somewhere. We need to reduce spending. That's absolutely right. But I also think we need to rebalance the tax system towards lowering income taxes, particularly on wage earners, as they're trying to build up wealth. And I think rebalancing those concessions towards younger people is what we should be doing. And so that's the challenge I would say to the coalition is, you want to be the party of lower taxes, but, we do have a finite amount of, sort of concessions we can hand out. Who do you really want to hand them to? I had a guy come up to me the other day in Bellevue Hill, and he said, look, I'm concerned that on some people on really big balances of super, they're paying less tax, than the person around the corner, the young worker who's looking after my children in a childcare centre. I think that young person should be paying less tax than someone who has multiple millions in super. And I think that's actually what most people, as a proportion of their income, that's what most people really think.
Okay, but it's still piecemeal. Are we ever going to get a package of reform here?
Oh,
I mean, do you think? I know,
look, I would love to
you're
see
onto
that.
this, but I mean, if the PM doesn't have the appetite for this, when he's got such a majority at the beginning of a term where you've got time to explain to people before the next election, what is your instinct on this? Do you think this is, is this government going to waste a once in a lifetime, or at least a generation, opportunity to actually tackle tax reform?
I certainly hope not. And you're absolutely right, Laura. I've been really clear from the start. What I want to see is broad packages. But and because I think that's our best chance of getting significant tax reform. But I look at what happened this week and I go, okay, the government listened to experts, to the community, and they compromised. And I think they've come out with a better package for that. And so I think that is actually quite a positive sign. Now the next step is to say, this isn't one and done in terms of how the tax system needs to change. We need to make it easier for young people to build the prosperity that their parents did. We need to make it easier for our businesses to invest and to innovate so that we can create prosperity and pay for all the things that we care about. And we need to make sure that the carbon transition costs as less as possible, and that means getting those tax settings right. So there's a lot more work to be done, but I see this actually as a positive move that the government's willing to compromise and listen. And I think that means that I've got more hope actually that we will see some reform.
Okay, we're just about to go to Kenny Heatley because there's been some breaking news out of the New South Wales court. Essentially, as you can see at the bottom of your screen there, anti-protest laws unconstitutional. This means this was basically challenged by the Palestinian Action Group having protests near places of worship. Allegra, this is particularly relevant now, particularly relevant to your electorate given what we've seen in the last week. If you could just make comment more generally about this and whether you should be able to protest near places of worship, and the fact that we've still got Palestinian sympathisers protesting after we seem to have at least some sort of peace deal.
Mm-hmm. So for me, this is, for the community that I represent, there has been enormous concern about protests, particularly outside of places of worship. And I think, I think in this country, we broadly view that you should be able to attend your place of worship freely. And so, I don't know the detail, but that has certainly been, issues of concern. And I think there's both the law and what is, I think, up to all of us as individuals, our responsibilities, because people have the right to protest in this country. It's really important. It's one of our fundamental democratic rights, and I think people need the right to exercise it. But we all need to be thoughtful and all need to take responsibility to think through how are we exercising those rights? Are we doing this in a way that is achieving goals? And are we doing this in a way that is also positive for this community more broadly, for the broader community? So I think people need to speak up and speak out when they need to. But I think you always have to think about how do your actions have impact on others? And so, for instance, I was clear when there was the recent protest and counter-protest on Bondi Beach. The point that I was trying to make is people have the right to protest and counter-protest. The question is the country better off for this? Is the world better off for this? Do we all need to think carefully about where and how we protest so that we can have our voices heard, but we also don't intimidate and stop other people doing what is also important to them, which is attending things like places of worship.
Allegra Spender, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.